Good afternoon, UK. This is Tim. I'm your host on the Buzz, and we've got Chris coming in today. It's Thursday. It's that day of the week where we talk on everything finance for the first hour with Chris. Now, Chris has been in finance for almost 3 decades, and he's been consulting around the world in South Africa and in the UK. Chris is also, consulting in his own firm. That's CS Jones, and he's now a host on the Buzz. He's talking about everything finance for us. Just to add him online. Good afternoon, Chris. How's it
Hey,
going?
Tim, how you doing?
Good. We've got a lot of we've got a lot of conversation around the mortgage thing, and then when we are breaking down things around going into debt. I think there's a lot of questions that people need to ask. I'm sure your expertise can add value to it. So where do you see how do you think we're going to structure this conversation today?
Yeah, well, I think, we start with mortgages because generally everyone needs one. We don't generally have the money to buy a property. And I also think we'll go into things like buy-to-let mortgages and those kind of, because it leads into the next program around investment. So it gets people thinking like that. I'll also tie the mortgages and debt back into the insurance discussions we had from last week. So how do we tie that in? How do you protect yourself? And then let's talk about debt itself, over and above mortgages, why it's different, what's good debt, what's bad debt, why do we need debt, and how you can, here's a word, leverage debt. It's a good technical term. So
Yeah,
should be good.
right. I'm excited as usual. What we'll do is we'll break it down in the lines of what we can do, and break it down in the lines of where we are going in terms of mortgages. I'm definitely hoping to get a lot of knowledge about this, and looking forward to it. So if you guys listening in are going to have any questions, make sure you ask them. Make sure you comment on this video. This show is live, so you obviously can be a part of it and add value, or clarify anything to do with questions when it comes to mortgages, or share this video with your friends, your family that are looking to getting advice from this type of conversation. Call us up on 07852473473. You can also WhatsApp on that number. We are streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so make sure you subscribe to us. But before that, before we go into the conversation, I'm going to show you a couple of videos again on who we are. Stay tuned. You're here with Chris and Tim on the Buzz. Good afternoon.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense.
They can't accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset, And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, "You had one to forget."
That's it. Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it." And that was it. So I'd dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you know, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. You know, when it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. You know how much. A lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, you know, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. You know, for the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
That's right. This is Relax Radio. And if you want to actually take us with you wherever you are, make sure you download our app. We go as Relax Radio on the App Store and Google Play. Our app is free and it's available for everyone right now. So if you want to stream from Relax Radio, make sure you download our app and just get listening. But coming back to the conversation with Chris, Chris, we can dive deep into it as usual.
Good, right. Mortgages. So to start off with, mortgage means until death in French. So it gives you some idea of the structure of the loan. And every mortgage has a bit of Latin in it, which is caveat emptor. So caveat emptor means buyer beware. And these two basic things just show that mortgages are generally a debt for life. And if you're not careful with what you do, you can seriously overpay. And that's anywhere around the world, and specifically in the UK. And it's strange that people would overpay on the mortgages, because in this day and age, it is so easy to change to a better rate. It can't be easier. Most people need to be aware that they should use a mortgage broker. I mean, yes, there are fees involved with a mortgage. Those fees are told to you up front, and they do make a difference on your payment. So if you have, as an example, a mortgage broker shows you a rate of 2% and there's another mortgage of 1.98%, the lower percentage mortgage may not be the best one for you because the fees may be higher. So you've got to do a little bit of math or a little bit of understanding, or just ask and make sure it's all taken into account. So how do you get mortgages? You know, generally we know they're used to buy a house, and you can't get 100% mortgages these days anymore. You should never ever have been able to get 100% mortgage ever, because that is relying on something happening in the future, i.e. the price of your house going up, which, as we've seen now, doesn't happen all the time. Yeah, it happens most of the time, but it can go down.
When did the concept of a mortgage initiate, Chris? If you know this, and now if I am to go ask the bank for a mortgage, what qualifies me? How do they look into my books and see if I am eligible for a mortgage?
It's a good question. So mortgages have been around for a long time, and I wanted to stay away from the topic of how mortgage originated because it's quite a complex area.
Okay.
Let's just say they've been around for a very long time. They are known, or they are in the kind of area of asset-backed lending, basically because you don't have to provide any collateral to the bank because your house that you're purchasing provides that collateral. So a couple of things banks will look at is your education, your job, your income, and where you're buying the house and what the value of the house is. Those are the kind of the main criteria around it. Basically because you need to borrow within affordability limits that are set, and these vary. And sometimes people use a multiple of annual salary, but it's not a really good way to do it. I would rather do it on a budget basis to ensure that it's correct. And then also the bank will value the house, because remember, a lot of people have, if you own a home, you know this, you value your home more than someone else will, because it's your home, right? You're putting memories and goodwill into that. So the bank values it at a kind of an asset type valuation, i.e. it takes, and this is what used to happen, it doesn't happen anymore, but the bank used to say, okay, what can we get for this house on an auction? And basically, we can get 60, 70, 80, 90% of the value of the auction. So that will determine, okay, if we can get 90% of the value back on an auction, if you don't pay your mortgage back, you need to give us 20% deposit and we'll lend you the money. That used to be the thinking behind the scenes. Now it's a lot more sophisticated, thank goodness. But the banks still have that kind of situation in hand to say, what can we recover of our asset if you default on your payments? And that will give us your risk rating and where you sit. Now, if you have a very high risk rating, i.e. you can't really, it's called the subprime mortgage market, right? Where you don't have a good credit score, or you haven't been in the market long enough, or, unfortunately, youngsters struggle with that because they haven't been in the market to build that credit rating up yet. Yeah. So a couple of things happen there. You need a larger deposit, or you have to pay a higher interest rate to compensate for the bank taking that risk. The lower risk you go, the better interest rates you get, the lower your mortgage payment, which is kind of the wrong way around, right? Because if you're a higher risk and they're giving you higher rates, you have to pay more on it. It kind of increases the risk, but that's how it works. Mortgages we tend to do mortgages around the 25-year mark. Reason for that, it can be anywhere from some mortgages go up to 30 years, all the way down to 5 or 10 years. And the reason we do this is affordability as well, so you stretch the payments out. Now, people need to be aware, as most mortgages have this in them. You take a 25-year mortgage, but they won't let you repay it. Let's say you win the lottery, and now you want to repay the mortgage. You get penalties for repaying it back. Generally, they say you can pay up to 10% of the outstanding balance every year. Above that, there's penalties. So these are little catches that you need to make sure that you're aware of. And then, of course,
coming into being aware of. I mean, with your experience, obviously, I'm trying to get the best out of the fact that you've got the know-how and you've got experience with people. Also, investing in or taking mortgages when it comes to their personal lives or maybe their businesses. And what would you say? I think we can go into a quick video again on Relax Radio, but then before that, just to I'll just pop the question up before we go into a quick break. But understanding how and what type of things people need to actually look at when taking a mortgage. Or we actually have a comment here. We have someone commented on this, and Josh is asking us what if in the current climate, is it really safe to take out a mortgage? And then his personal take is that it is a huge risk. What is your take on that, Chris?
Well, let's look at it two ways. Okay, so I'm assuming Josh is looking at property as not a good investment at the moment, or that the capital value is not going to grow as much, because that's the only reason a mortgage would be risk, right? If you have to sell that property and then still owe money on it. So you can't argue. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but this is long-term investment anyway. Where I would say that mortgages are pretty good to take out on property right now, for one thing, is that interest rates are very low. So the cost of money is relatively cheap to what it used to be 5 years ago. So, your payments are lower. I had a look at the mortgage rates just before I came on, just to make sure that I'm up to date with this. And you can get rates from 3% being kind of the most expensive out there, where you've only got a 10% deposit and these kind of things, all the way down to 0.99%, where you've got a large deposit or you're remortgaging and you're only fixing for 2 years kind of thing. So there's quite a wide variation there. However, you're not seeing much over 3%. I'm old enough to remember the days I had a mortgage once at 18%. That's current credit card levels. So it's very cheap. So is it really safe to take out a mortgage? Well, it depends. You're using it for your own home. You're either paying rent to someone who puts it in their mortgage, or you putting it in your own mortgage. And most people would go, well, I'd rather put it in my own mortgage, because then at least I have my home and my asset. So I don't know. I don't think there's that much risk. As long as you can afford it. You don't take £1 million mortgage if you earn 50 grand a year. Well, you won't get one, but kind of thing.
Any risks taken should be calculated, obviously. And then coming further into, Josh, we hope that answered your question. If you do have a follow-up question, please feel free to comment again on the video so we can address it. But before we head out, we're going to tell what we're going to be basically discussing is things in the lines of what actually help you qualify and what you should consider before taking a mortgage, what calculations you should make when it comes to yourself, your cash flow, how you're looking at getting the cash back, things like that. But right after, we'll actually be running into a couple of videos, but stay tuned right here on Relaks Radio. You're tuned in on The Buzz. Make sure you call us up on 07852 473 473. Also, download our app. It's on Google Play and the App Store. So if you want to take us with you wherever you go, make sure you're tuned in on Relaks Radio. You're tuned in on The Buzz with Chris and Tim. Good afternoon.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flows. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. Rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay it off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if that if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
That's right. We've got a lot of finance conversations. We've got, superb highlights and a lot of information that you can actually take home or keep with you. Use it in your life, basically. I mean, this is just, food for the mind. And, if you're tuned in on the buzz, make sure you get the best of it. It's every day from 12 to 3 p.m. We've got Chris coming in on Thursdays from 12 to 1 p.m. So make sure you slot this hour in and don't basically keep all your meetings free, keep your calendar free for Thursdays from 12 to 1 p.m. Now, coming back into the question with Chris, what calculations should you make when looking at taking a mortgage or looking at applying for a mortgage? What things you should consider before a mortgage is basically a risk as well. So how do you stay out of the worst case scenario? What are things, Chris, that we can basically get out of this to save?
Look, I mean, okay, so most people will be paying rent, right, before they go and buy a property. So you can use the current rent you're paying as a good guide stick. I think there was a report out by Rightmove a couple of weeks ago, and I could be wrong when it came out, but I caught the headline saying that at the moment, because mortgage rates are so low, the cost of owning a home equivalent to renting a home is about 25% cheaper. So, and that goes up and down. So it could be more expensive, could be cheaper depending on the rates. If you use the amount that you're paying for rent at the moment, then you're pretty much in the same safe space, because you're not increasing your monthly outflow. Remember when we spoke weeks and weeks ago about, as you saw in that little clip, cash flow is king, right? So you don't want to say,
absolutely.
Oh, look, we've been saving for this deposit and we've been saving £500 a month and and now we've got a deposit and we can get a mortgage that takes up that £500 a month because that's okay. No, that's not okay. Keep your rent and your mortgage payment. If you can keep those the same, you're safe. Let's use the phrase safe as houses, right? Which isn't correct, by the way. So then it's
what
most
was
people.
What was that saying you said, Chris? Safe as houses, right?
Yeah, people used to say safe as houses because the general being was the properties never went down, right? And you got to remember, certainly my parents and their parents were buying properties that cost the same as a normal car does today. So, we can go back to the inflation discussion we had. It all links through, right? Now we see it happening.
Is a whole other conversation, I think.
So let's get back to it. So if you're pretty safe if you use that as a guideline. Now, most people struggle not with the monthly payments. That's not where they fall over. It's with the deposit. Because let's say you are paying, I don't know, whatever you're paying in your monthly rent, and you've gone online or you've spoken to a mortgage broker and they've said, current rates where you are and what you're looking, you can buy a house worth, I don't know, £300,000. I'm just making stuff up. So you said, fine, that's great. Okay. And the mortgage broker says, in order to get, a really decent rate, and for the bank to accept you quickly and be on normal, we need a 20% deposit. Let's just argue. So now you've got to come up with £60,000. That's the sticking point, right? That's where people go, oh, well, okay, now it's out of my reach, right? Or I can get £30,000. However, now I'm paying 20% more on my payments. So it's no longer my rent payment. Now I'm paying 20% more because I've got less deposit. And now there's a trade-off. What do you do? So it's difficult. And there's no right or wrong answer there, being that you should do this or you should do that. It's a conversation. It's okay. So where are you in your life? Are you a youngster who's a professional and you're growing in your career and you're pretty certain that, you know, in 5 years' time you're going to be earning 50% more?
Right.
Or are you in your 50s and you're remortgaging and you've kind of hit the zenith of your career and it's not going to increase anymore? So, you know, you've got to have those conversations. But if you are mortgaging for the first time or the 50th time and you're currently renting, using the current rent you pay, try not deviate from that, because that's an easy start, right? It's an easy win. So go from there.
When I think we have a whole different maybe conversation to follow up on if it comes to calculating if it's worth, you know, paying rent, or if it is worth, you know, getting a mortgage for a house. That I think maybe we can break it down briefly here, but then go into it on another conversation there for anyone that will actually find it valuable. What would you take? How would you answer it in maybe a sentence or two, Chris, when it comes to that question? If someone asks you,
personal preference. I currently rent because we didn't know the area when we moved here. So we rent to find out about the area, find out where we are, and then we'll look to buy. So that's a valid reason. Other people just don't like owning a property, or not that they're averse to owning a property, they just don't like the big debt, which is fine as well. You know, renting's fine. It has its risks and it has its downfalls. Like, you know, you can't just add extensions to the property, but it's definitely personal preference, you know.
Right,
So,
right, yeah. And so then to basically go into the next part of it, how else would you? Let's assume you've taken a mortgage and you are in the point where you are paying it off, and you know you're looking at ways and means of, you know, getting rid of that the debt fast. What would you say a very productive or efficient way of, you know, getting rid of that is? I was just thinking, by the way, when you said the 20% down payment, you know, this was something we spoke of a couple of weeks ago, at least I think somewhere around the beginning of our conversations, when it came to you know, having a percentage of your cash flow allocated for, you know, emergency funds or other investments. So I mean, me myself, I've been, you know, making sure that I've been living below you know, what I actually can, and just keeping a fraction out for further investments. So I mean, me personally, I'm taking a lot from this, and you know, I was just thinking, so that would be, given that I feel like, you know, given that taking a mortgage would be an asset for me by any chance. So maybe, you know, by chance, if I take that money out for something like this, that would be a possibility, right?
Yeah. Well, let's so let's take a step back. You've got the structure of the mortgage. So you also have interest only and repayment mortgages. Now that makes a big difference as well, because I would always advocate someone has a full repayment mortgage where you're paying the capital and the interest at the same time. But you can also get an interest only mortgage where you're just paying the interest. And of course, that reduces your monthly payments, but it increases your overall payment massively. Okay. And this segues into being able to afford to save on the side as well. So there are people who are taking interest-only mortgage, which is fine, as it's, let's call it personal preference. And, you know, I'm an advisor. That's what you can say to me is, no, I don't accept your advice. But then what I would insist on, and banks insist on this now, but I've always insisted on this, is that you have some kind of investment or savings vehicle on the side that allocates the appropriate capital payments to this vehicle. And what we generally use is the ISA account, which is that tax-free individual savings account. So you use your ISA allowance, and that just stays there. And what happens there is that money is then invested on the side to pay that capital amount. But bear in mind one thing. mortgages are what are called front-loaded instruments. So in the beginning of the mortgage, you're pretty much just paying interest. And as you go through the life of the mortgage, you pay more and more and more capital back. On an interest-only mortgage, you're only paying interest. It never reduces, it never changes, unless, of course, you change the mortgage, you change the rate. However, you've still got that debt. And who was it, Ron, who came on the show and asked, aren't mortgages a risk? Well, yes, in that case, mortgages are high risk, because there could be a case where you get to the term of the mortgage, the bank wants its money back, and now you've made all these payments over these years and you still owe this capital amount. So it is dangerous, but you've got to put an investment aside. Now, going back to your question, how to pay it off as quickly as possible. So you want a full repayment mortgage. That's the first thing, so that you're reducing that capital over time. And you then, by that very nature, you increasing the asset side on your balance sheet, right? Those asset liabilities. So you're decreasing the liability, increasing the asset, because let's assume house prices stay the same just for sake of argument. You're reducing the debt on that, so you've just got more equity in that property. It's that equation, right? Equity is liabilities less assets. Okay. So then you use investment vehicles on the side as well, like your ISA accounts and other various vehicles. You don't want to use a pension for this, because remember, your pension, and we'll go into more detail, is a delayed income vehicle, but you certainly want to use your ISA. So let's take an example. You've got a 10-year mortgage and it's £200,000. That's the mortgage, just to make my maths really easy, right? You're doing a repayment mortgage on it, so it's reducing slightly each year, but you are able to also put £20,000 into your ISA each year, okay? On top of that,
Chris, I think we're going to have to slow down when we talk about numbers, because I think, you are obviously, you're very fast when it comes to numbers, but, talking to everyone, I think we're going to have to just slow it down for normal people.
Okay, let's slow down. Let's backtrack. Okay.
So you said 20 years, £10,000.
So let's say 10 years, £200,000 mortgage.
200,000, yeah.
How do you pay it back as quickly as possible, right? First, you do full repayment, so you're paying the capital and the interest. Secondly, you take advantage of that 10% overpay every year. What that means is, at the end of the year, whatever the outstanding amount of the mortgage is, you can pay 10% of that back to the bank.
Right.
Yeah? So that's one thing. So that reduces that down. On top of that, you want to put the maximum amount that you can afford, or the maximum amount allowed, 20,000 in the case of this tax year, into your individual savings account, so that you've got that on the side. And what's that used for? So at any time, you can use that to make the 10% overpayment. Because remember, if you make a 10% overpayment every year, you pay that mortgage off in 10 years.
Correct.
So it's as quick as that. Not everyone can afford it. Not everyone can do it. But if you do those little things as much as you can each year, you will reduce that mortgage significantly. Now, think about this for an instance. You pay rent to someone, and let's say it's £1,000 a month. Or you have a mortgage at £1,000 a month. Got the same income, got the same savings mentality, got everything like that. You're still putting into the ISAs. But on your mortgage, you're putting 10% away, and as an argument, you pay it off in 10 years. Now, in 10 years, you're still paying rent of £1,000 a month. You're not, because that's increased, because it's inflationary where your mortgage hasn't. But in 10 years, you're not paying a mortgage anymore. Now you've suddenly got £1,000 free, and you're still living in the house. Right. So that's a big consideration for people as well. So, that's a good position to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And what else do we have to, I think you're the expert on this, since you are the expert on this. What else would you recommend for people to, consider when it comes to mortgages? And I think we'll take a quick break, but before we head out, we'll just, get a glimpse of what you think we should, look into.
One thing is, I see a lot of people remortgaging and then releasing money from their equity in their home. So increasing the loan to value when they've taken years to bring it down. that needs to be considered. You need to be careful about that, because you're increasing your monthly payments and increasing liabilities. I know you'll put it into your home and make it better, but caution.
Right. And in terms of you said there are key factors when it comes to valuating things and when it comes to inflation. Maybe we can also discuss a little on those when we come back on how little things that you need to actually, that the banks don't always mention to you, that you can actually explore, and also things in the lines of how you can basically, I mean, what I'm trying to get is at the point where we can understand things that the bank basically doesn't always mention to us. And a ton of people just go talk numbers, and then they just sign a document that they skip a lot of terms and conditions, or a lot of clauses. They just skip all that. Also, the questions that they don't ask, I think we can also bring that up. So before we come back, we'll basically get into a couple of videos on who we are at Relaks Radio. Like I said, make sure you're tuned in till 1 p.m. if you want to talk, if you want to actually get into a conversation with Chris. Share this video with your friends, your family that are looking to take mortgages or are currently paying mortgages off, because I'm pretty sure, 100% guarantee they will get some value out of this conversation with Chris. And we can actually make sure you call us up on 07852 473 473. You can also download our app. It's Relaks Radio. That's RELAKS Radio on Google Play and the App Store. It's free. Make sure you're tuned in all the way till 3 p.m. This is The Buzz. Good afternoon, and you're tuned in on Relaks Radio.
One of the easiest ways to increase the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be, so that there's a goal, and then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with, and your education level or your lack of education or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account. And then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it. We're on track. We're not. This is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's a struggle. Yeah. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million, and they're different. Right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country, to be fair. Different countries have different tax laws. So there's different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies and then you step up into different things.
That's right. This is Relax Radio. You're tuned in on the buzz. This is Tim, and I've got Chris Jones. Chris is an he's an accountant. He is a financial advisor. He has been he's basically an expert in the industry. You know, if you are tuning in on the buzz Thursdays 12 to 1 p.m. If you want to know anything about increasing your financial literacy, anything of that sort, you know, this is the place to be. Make sure you're tuned and locked in on the buzz with Chris. So, Chris, coming into the last 15 minutes of the show, I think we have quite a bit to cover. And in terms of the conversation around the questions that we should ask a bank, anything else you think we should consider?
Quick thing, just in case anyone calls me, I'm not an accountant. I'm a finance guy.
Finance.
Just make sure. Yeah.
My bad,
well, the accountants I know are like, he's not an accountant. Look, I mean, okay, so we covered mortgages in quite a bit of detail, and I think the important thing as we left it off there before the break was you need to get a good mortgage advisor, a good mortgage broker, someone you trust, someone you feel has your interests at heart. And there's a lot of them out there, because while I don't believe the banks hold anything back, you're right, there may be a mistrust there. And, you know, a person, doesn't matter what I say or you say or the banks say, a person may not trust them. But if this is why we intermediate as well. This is why we are the go-betweens, because we can create that trust and that rapport with people and ensure that, hey, yes, this is how I get paid for what I do, and I've got your interests at heart, and here's all the transparency you need. And they can also help you structure the application correctly, because that's important. You know, two people in exactly the same circumstances, one may get it, one may not. And it's just the basis of how they presented the information in the application. Unfortunately, it can be like that. So quite important.
That's exactly why I'm coming to you instead of a bank first.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's and I've got a friend of mine who's doing his remortgage through me, and we're staying at the same bank. It's right. You know, that can be done, not because he doesn't trust the bank. It's because he trusts me. So, you know, and we make sure that it's the same thing. So it's all good. Let's touch on other debt, because I think that's important as well, because we know mortgages, it's a main debt. Quickly, before I touch on other debt, I wanted to mention how to protect the mortgage. What banks will insist on when you take a mortgage is you take life cover out, so that if something happens to you, the debt's paid off, right? So the bank doesn't have to repossess the home, because I think, and that's a very smart bit of financial planning. It's not a forced buy, because if something does happen to you and you have a family, especially if you have dependents, you don't want the home being taken away at that time, so you buy life cover. Unfortunately, it's always been an uphill battle before, when people said, well, I don't really see, I'm not going to die, you know, I'm immortal. This is the whole thought process. So now the banks insist on it, and it's brilliant. It's one of the best things that's ever happened. And it's not a huge amount. And so when we go back to that budget, you've got to include the cost of life cover in your budget. And life cover doesn't cost a huge amount. You're talking, for most people, around 10 to 50 pounds a month extra. So, but it covers you, and you're protected on that. You and your family are protected. If it's joint mortgage, you have joint life cover, things like that. So that's good. It's quite simple.
What things should people make sure that they include, or maybe how now you spoke about how they present their numbers. You know, just give me a bit of a breakdown on that.
Well, things like, you know, you got to make sure a couple of things. One person said, no, I'll get a mortgage easily. This one told me, no. And I said, okay, I agree, but because you're not going to argue with someone like that. But what I do say is, let's rather include with the application, in your case, your budget and what you're actually paying for. And why must I do this? Well, you're a first-time home buyer, you're under the age of 30, and you're not a professional. So all those, unfortunately, work against you. But if we give them a budget, a process, a plan, maybe a little bit of future thinking on your half of what you're going to do, it just gets the bank feeling, this person's serious. This person actually knows what they're doing. And lo and behold, it sailed through. I don't know if that helped, but it certainly didn't hinder. So it's those kind of things. Right. Also, I've had a professional who didn't get a mortgage. Why? Professional over the age of 30 looking for a mortgage, slightly stretched on the income, but that's okay because we know they're a professional and they're going to be increasing. However, that wasn't explained correctly. The story wasn't put together succinctly, not by me, by the way, by someone else. But it's all stories, right? You've got to, even the banks, you've got to give them a nice story that's factual, that is true, and makes sense. And they can see and feel the person applying. Because yes, the days are gone where you sit in front of the manager and ask for the loan, and most of it is done electronically. However, sometimes you need that story, and it's good. So yeah, that's where a good mortgage broker comes into their own, because we all have the systems. We can all check the best rates. It's how do they talk? How do they explain themselves? How do they interact with you? Do they know you?
Yeah, correct. Any other things we need to consider, Chris, apart from what we discussed when it comes to the topic, when it comes to considering the costs around it?
Well, let's move on from residential and go to buy-to-let mortgages, because that segues into good or bad debt, right? Right. And where we go from there. So I know we don't have much time left, but a lot of people will look at buying property as their main investment to rent out. And I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It's not as tax efficient as some others, so you should run the tax efficient ones out first and then do this. But that's just a tick box exercise. So buy-to-let mortgages are different. They are looked at differently, and they are the risk is different. So while they may look at your income and your profession and your education and where you're buying the property and the value of the property still, as they do with residentials, there'll be a couple of other bits in there, like how rentable is the property, which is a gauge, right? So if you have a 9-bedroom mansion out in the country, it's not going to be as rentable as a 1-bedroom studio flat in Clapham, just to give you a very stark contrast there. Yeah. Also, what are the rental prices in the area? So they'll have those, because they will look at the rent coming in as the affordability matrix, but it's not the whole rent, because you've got to pay an agent to look after it. As an example, you've got maintenance costs, you've got sometimes licensing fees and things like that to take care of. So you've got to be very careful when you do a buy-to-let, because it is an investment. And I see too many people doing this. They take a buy-to-let, the rent doesn't cover the actual cost of the mortgage, and they've still got maintenance on top of that, and they've still got a few things, and they say, no, but hang on, Chris, it's an investment into a property. Well, look, it's no longer an asset, right? Because it's not making you money. It's actually costing you money, so now it's a liability. Yes, but what if property prices went up? Okay, what if property prices went up? It's still costing you money. Oh, but then I'll sell. Fine, it's just a loop, because what you're doing is you're predicting the future. So in buy-to-let, be very careful. Try not to predict the future. Do it what it is right there and then, and generate a positive yield, i.e., don't put money into the property. Yeah, there's lots of reasons why someone may be putting money into a property, and it's not all to do with overextending themselves. But if you can, and if you're doing it for an investment and it's for your extra cash, then it must be a positive yield, including your maintenance and paying and everyone. The mortgage rates on buy-to-let are generally higher because it is a higher risk. It's seen as a second purchase by the banks because they also look at, a lot of people say, oh, well, I'll have 12-month occupancy. Well, you can't work on that because we work on 10-month occupancy. Whether that's right or wrong is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. We're just taking into account that sometimes you may not have a tenant in your rental. So work on a 10-month occupancy rate and then see if you can get the figures working. And there's, again, I always refer to online calculators, but I run a spreadsheet for my clients and we put that yield in. And it's a good debt. The buy-to-let is a way that, let's say you had £1 million, and what you did was you went and you bought 4 flats at £250,000 each and rented them out. But you didn't pay £1 million, right? Let's say you bought 8 flats at £250,000 each and you mortgaged half and you paid half. Effectively, if you've done your maths right and those rents are coming in and it's looking after itself, and you can overpay that mortgage, you double your money, right? Once those mortgages are paid, given that the property market doesn't move, and hopefully it moves in your favor. So you've got all those. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with it, but it takes work. People don't realize how much work that takes. Then I want to go.
Definitely, that's definitely a best case scenario, I'm assuming, and yeah. But I'd love to be in. Yeah, and yeah. So yeah, you were saying, Chris, just go ahead.
No, that's okay. So from the mortgage side of things, I just want people to remember 2 things. Yeah, the Latin caveat emptor, which means buyer beware, and what mortgage means, until death in French, right? So go with caution. It's good. It works. It's a great tool to buy a home and increase your asset base if done correctly. And then I want to just quickly touch on other debts because I know we're running out of time. You have credit card debts, you have personal loans, you have those workday loans, the salary stuff, you have hire purchase agreements, you have car loans, you have everything, right? Debt, all that debt. We all need it. We all use it. No one really buys a car for cash because it's just too expensive. This is where we see the effect of all that money coming into the system and the inflation impacts on the goods that we have. Back in the day, 50 years ago, you could buy a car for £1,000 brand new. I'm making it up. Of course, I don't know what you could do, but I'm assuming it's something like that. And you could do it for cash. If you didn't need a university degree and a professional job to own your own home, raise 2 kids and have a normal life. Now, if you do have a degree and you're in a professional job, you've got more debt than anything you know what to do with. Right?
It's a completely different story now.
Yeah. So it gets scary. So you've got to manage your debt. So you've got to look at it like this. The most expensive debt are those payday loans. If you ever get into them, you're in real trouble anyway because you just don't have enough at the end of the month and you're recycling. I mean, those are just high. But for most people, it's credit cards. Your credit card is the killer. It'll kill you slowly. It's 1,000 cuts, right? You need to get rid of that. That's your first kind of priority, is to get rid of your credit card debt. Then any other debts, like
that's the credit card debt, though, right? I mean, I don't mean to argue, but then again, when it comes to credit cards, I think if you use it right, if you pay off every month on time, it can be a lifesaver when it comes to saving up or even having that emergency access to cash, right?
Not even that. There are credit cards out there with some real bonuses and perks. So, for instance, if I pay for a holiday on my credit card, I get free travel insurance.
That's
As
yeah,
long as I pay that off at the end of the month and don't incur the
absolutely.
interest charges, it works, right?
Mm.
So yes, credit cards are an amazing tool. What I'm talking about here is where most of us sit and we pay monthly into a credit card from purchases that have been made a while ago. It's a
Absolutely.
killer.
That's
Yeah.
that discipline alone is, it's a discipline by itself, just knowing what time to spend, where to spend, what to allocate for,
Yeah.
just your personal accounting on a monthly basis. That alone is a discipline you can build up, and you don't know, I mean, you can do wonders with it, right? Because like saying goes, what gets measured gets done, or can be controlled. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Anyways, we have I think we can do a completely different segment on credit cards as well. We've got insurances, mortgages and debt coming up next week, and then
Next week's tax.
yes, next week is tax. Sorry. So next week is tax, and then we've got to go into investments and savings, get
Yeah.
into pensions, estate planning. I'm definitely looking forward to the next couple of weeks, Chris.
It's going to be a tax primer for everyone, right?
Yeah,
And I know people think it's boring, but come on, it's tax.
you have to.
I get
You
quite
have to.
excited about it.
Yeah, one of the things you said at the beginning was that when it comes to one thing that inspired you to get into the career you are in was the fact that we are in a world that beats the heart of it beats around money, right? Basically, the blood to the earth is basically money, and you know that kind of thing. I mean, it definitely kind of shifted my perspective on it as well, because you have a ton of people that preach around, that you can't buy happiness with money. You can't really, it's not the real purpose of life, so on and so forth. But,
I'd
you
rather be
need to
sad
be,
in a Bentley than a Ford, right?
yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And, yeah, looking forward to the next couple of weeks, Chris. Appreciate your time on the show as always.
Good. Thanks, Tim. Always a pleasure. And we'll see you next week.
Awesome. So if you like this video, make sure you are tuned in on the buzz. If you want to get into a conversation with Chris, tune in on Thursdays, 12 to 1 p.m. Comment on our videos. You can call us up on 07852 473 473. That's Relax Radio. You can also download our app. Make sure you spell it right. It's RELAKS. That's Relax Radio. And, make sure you have us with you wherever you go. Now, just before we sign out, I want to thank Chris again. Thanks, Chris, for putting your time into the show. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us. I'm looking forward to next week as usual.
Thanks, Tim. Will do.
Awesome. Have a good week, Chris.
Cheers, buddy.